we're going to do a little bit of intro of how Gina and I kind of came to work together, and we went through the logistics. One of the things is, that I wanted to answer for myself when I learned about it and want to share is, why use this clean language coaching? There's so many different models out there, and especially through ICF, a very progressive, laid out approach. How and why does clean coaching fit in? We're going to go through, and Gina's going to give you a little bit more background about where it came from, how it evolved, as well as David Grove, that's been kind of touted as the creator. And then we're going to give you a chance to actually demonstrate it. One, by seeing a demonstration, and then two, you get to practice. We're going to get a chance to just kind of talk about what we've learned and share some of the learnings, as well as some time to just have some questions. So that's kind of the flow. As you can see, the two of us have different backgrounds, and exciting that we've been able to come together and partner. So my journey was 3 years ago, leaving corporate America, overseeing learning and development for a large corporation, to moving into this coaching approach. And for me, I really wanted to be the best coach I could be. So I went through a couple different programs, ended up with ICF and working through their process to get certified. But I felt like there was something that was missing. And so it was around, how do you really ask those powerful questions? Those questions that once you've asked them and there's silence and your client's going, and you really get to something deeper. I wanted to be really good at that. And now my journey of moving into a coach was kind of reprogramming my brain from giving the answers to really pulling them out and asking the right questions to get to them. And clean language really fit that gap that I felt, and as I've coached other coaches now, I think we might have in common as we're especially becoming even stronger coaches. So I was introduced to Gina by my daughter, who is an art therapist, at a conference, and I started reading her books and her approach, and just really found it was, one, well written. It's really great information, and the way that Gina teaches it and trains really aligns with how I learn, and coming from the learning profession, just a really a great way to do that. And that kind of stems from her desire to want to give this to us, plus her teaching background. So we decided that we wanted to partner. We presented last year at the ICF conference, Converge, and we were overwhelmed with just how many people showed up, and the feedback was very, very positive, that this was something that people really felt would help them be stronger coaches. And just in a little bit of time, by practicing it with each other, the ability to really absorb it and see how it could fit in was tremendous. So Gina is a true expert on using clean language. She's got a great background for it, and she's been training other trainers and coaches and therapists, a wide range of people. And she's also an author of 4 books that really just help break it down even further, and you can learn from. So what's different about clean language, and why, why do we care about this? And it's really using these clean language questions and focusing in on the metaphors that your clients have. And so many of these metaphors are unconscious, and they'll bring them up and they're not even realizing that they're bringing them up. But by seeing and identifying those and using those metaphors, you really can help your clients get unstuck and to their desired outcomes so much faster. I've been amazed how quickly I've been able to help people through the right questioning uncover things that they didn't even know that were there. And it aligns so nicely with neuroscience. So most of us that have gone through coaching programs, that usually is a big chunk of it, is how the brain works. And by having people get their own, come up with their own answers and think things through, really helps to create those pathways and create new behaviors. So, and it also helps ensure that you're not bringing in your biases or your assumptions into that really critical process of having your clients discover and learn. And, I thought I was doing this until I really learned more about clean language, and I realized some of the questions I was asking was they were leading people instead of really helping people go where they needed to go. And the align with the core competencies with ICF, I just found to be such a strong correlation. One, the most obvious was just powerful questions. How do you ask the right question at the right time that really helps your client move forward? It also gives you a great process around active listening and techniques to be able to reflect back what is said in the most succinct and effective way for your client, as well as just creating awareness and being able to integrate and accurately reflect and identify what your client's saying and not saying, and then know what your next step is in helping them take this journey to get the best desired outcome and the best approach for them. So those are the 3 competencies, but I could go through each one, even direct communication and how this fits in and using your client's words and how it helps them in the process. So now I'm going to let Gina, turn it over to Gina, and she's going to tell you a little bit about where this clean language came from.
So this is David Grove. As you see, he died in 2008, sadly young at 57, 58. He was originally from New Zealand, which I find interesting because his mother's family, she was Maori, which is, whoa, go back one. Maori, which is the Aboriginal native tribe of New Zealand. And dreams are very important in the Maori culture, which I find interesting for someone who came to that really unique approach to an awareness of the role that metaphors plays in people. The idea that symbols were something he was just very aware of. He originally started as a therapist. He got his degree actually at the University of Minnesota, I believe it was, as a counseling psychologist. There was no such thing as a coach, the way we consider it a field today. But around 2002 or so, he, as the coaching field began to become more and more prevalent, and so many coaches were attracted to clean language, he began to think in terms of how can you use clean, what processes can he develop for coaching in particular. And so it was definitely in the scope of how he thought. He was a very creative person. I mean, I've heard a number of people call him a genius. His IQ was just off the charts. As a person, he could be a bit strange at times, but he could also be very charming and just constantly developing new ways. And so there are lots of clean processes, lots of different methods or techniques or structured activities, that kind of thing. But they all come under the umbrella of clean language, which I'll describe. Okay. So the first thing I think unique about clean language is the way it uses your client's metaphors. Now, there are plenty of coaching and therapeutic techniques and so forth that use metaphors, but usually what is encouraged is the facilitator, and I like that term facilitator rather than coach or therapist or any other thing, because to facilitate means to make easier. And so I really think of my role as a facilitator. I'm not giving, my advice is not my input. I'm making easier my client's ability to know himself and to help herself change. But the metaphors we're using are not coming from the facilitator. They're coming from the client. And we do this without realizing it. We use metaphors. One research I read said up to 6 a minute, which may seem incredible to you, but you can think of metaphors in various different ways. There are overt metaphors, that is obvious metaphors, such as, it's like hitting my head against a brick wall. Well, we all tend to hear those. Or how about, it's an uphill struggle for me. Well, you hear uphill. But what if someone says, I have to push myself? Well, where's the metaphor? It's the push. Push. And if you get really subtle, a little more advanced, certainly than we're going to get today, I have to push myself. There are 2 I's. There's an I and there's a myself. And if you ask questions, you will find they have different qualities and different strengths and weaknesses, and often they're of different ages. Usually the I is the adult self, and the myself is often younger. Just to give you an idea of how subtle this can be. But the idea here is that we all use metaphors to encode our experience, to make sense of the world. We can't take in every experience and then remember that when we need information about how to handle a new situation that comes up. That would just be incredibly inefficient. So what do? We take a metaphor, we make a metaphor to encode our understanding of something that happens that's going to be useful to us. So let's say you have an experience of frustration. And so you subconsciously even say, it's like hitting my head against a brick wall. And you may have had frustration as a child, probably don't even remember. You may have had a second grade teacher who was frustrating, a spouse who was frustrating, a boss who was frustrating. And if the qualities or the characteristics of the experience were similar, you're going to file them like in a reference library, or to think of a computer, you're going to put them all in one folder. And then when you come across a frustrating experience, you're going to go, is this subconsciously now, you're going to go to that folder or that reference book to get some strategies on how to manage that situation based on your previous experience and your understanding of it. Now, sometimes in that folder is going to be very helpful information. If it's like hitting my head against a brick wall, I'm going to turn around and go the other way. That might be one strategy. So maybe that serves you. But sometimes the metaphor that you've encoded that experience in, you've either outgrown the solution you came up with, so it no longer serves you, or it was somehow faulty from the beginning. And this happens often when we're very small children. We come up with strategies, such as, I live in a scary household with an alcoholic parent. I'm just going to hide my true self. I'm going to tuck my true self in my heart. And it's usually in a box, in a cave, behind a shield. It's in some protective, small environment. And then a person gets to 40 or 50 or 60 and says, I just can't seem to really connect with the people I love. I really love them, but I'm just not bringing my true person to them. I wish I could be more open. So metaphors can support or thwart clarity, well-being, and our successful functioning in the world. And those are the things that you can reveal as a coach, that when you stay on a normal talking conscious awareness level, you may never get to the underlying metaphors that are holding this person in an old pattern, in an old loop that they just can't step out of. And so you can be remarkably effective very quickly. Diana, thank you. So what's clean about clean language? Why is it called clean language? Well, David Grove, as I said, was the developer of clean language. And by clean, he meant it is not sullied, if you will, dirtied or contaminated by you, the facilitator or coaches, your words, your history, your assumptions, your metaphors. We very easily put our own metaphors into questions we ask. It's very simple. We do it all the time, but with clean language, David worked on what questions can I ask? So that their clean language questions are very simple, very short. Rarely do the words have more than 2 syllables. They're things like, I'm going to show you, and is there anything else about a word from your client? What kind of, I don't know, change is that change? And you keep your perspective out. How do you keep, as Candace was saying, how do you keep yourself out of it and really let your client discover what he or she needs to discover? And that's what the term clean means. Okay, Diana. So I pulled some examples. Diana mentioned that she and I presented at the ICF Converge conference back in August. And people were sent some kind of form and asked them, what are typical things that your clients come to you to work on? And I pulled a bunch of words out of this list. I could easily have pulled more, but look how many there were that imply metaphors. And these are the kind of words when your client brings up, Using clean language, you can help that person explore. Clarity. So think about, as I read this list, as you read over it, how many times you've heard this from clients. Clarity, focus, balance, overwhelm, conflicted, blocks, burnout, letting go. Energy, you get lots of kinds of energy. Energy in different places, energy of different kinds. Alignment. You'll also get words like grounded or centered. Self-limiting, inner saboteur, crossroads, stuck. You hear stuck a lot. And move forward, you hear a lot. So these are the kind of words that you might hear, and some of them you might never notice there's a metaphor. Now, what do I mean by implied metaphor? If you look at each one of these words, they suggest an image. They could suggest an image. Someone might use it and not mean an image, and somebody else might very quickly come to an image, but they could. So if you heard overwhelm, someone might say it's like getting knocked down by a wave at the beach. Now it's a metaphor. It's only implied when the word suggests an image. You're not there yet. But that's what I mean by a suggested or implied metaphor.